Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you tuned into my last video, you know that we broke down the plot of the video game Kid Icarus Uprising and learned a lot of crazy stuff about it. Well, today we're going to be looking at it from a more mythological perspective. So let's start by diving into who exactly Pitt's character is based on. The obvious answer would be Icarus, but surprisingly enough, Pitt is actually based off of 3 different mythological beings. The first one being Icarus, as we know, but on top of that, he's also influenced by Perseus and Eros, who I'm going to be referring to as his Roman name Cupid. So Pitt is derived from Icarus, Perseus, and Cupid. With that, let's dive into each of their 3 myths and compare them to what we've seen in the game. So we're going to start with Icarus. Just a little brief background. He is the son of Daedalus, and Daedalus is a powerful craftsman and builds a labyrinth in an island in Greece called Crete. And Icarus and Daedalus are trapped within this labyrinth by King Minos. So within Daedalus's craftsmanship, he decides to, get crafty and build something to help him and his son escape. So he uses wax and feathers to create wings for him and Icarus to fly out of the labyrinth. Makes sense to me. Can't find your way out? Just rise above, fly right out. Perfect plan. Absolutely nothing could go wrong, right? Wrong. So they've each got their own set of wings. However, Daedalus warns Icarus not to fly too close to the sun because it could melt the wax. But also, he can't fly too low or else his wings will get wet with the seawater and they won't fly. Well, it just so happens that Icarus is really caught up in the thrill of flying and flies higher and higher, getting closer and closer to the sun. Yikes. Can you guess what happens next? The wax on his wings begins to melt and the feathers wither away from the heat of the sun. And Icarus falls to his death and plummets into the sea. Definitely not a happy ending, but the story is often used as a cautionary tale representing the dangers of carelessness and getting lost in the thrill of something. And Icarus was warned about the dangers, yet he thought he was safe, and he was just kind of careless. The phrase, "don't fly too close to the sun," is a metaphor often used to warn people, don't get in over your head, don't bite off more than you can chew, those kinds of things, or something to that effect. So that's where that saying is derived from, this myth. The more you know. Okay, so let's talk about how this relates to Kid Icarus Uprising. Obviously, it would be a pretty boring game if the main character died. So I applaud the creators of the game for taking a different route with the story, because that would kind of suck. Really, none of the plot from that myth is explicitly included within the game, but here are some other similarities to be found. So we know Pitt is an angel, and he can't fly because his wings are too small. However, he's gifted with the power of flight, but he can only use it for 5 minutes at a time or his wings burn up. So there it is. So in the game, it's less about where he's flying or what he shouldn't be flying close to. And it's more just about how long he's flying. And so that's what will cause the wings to burn versus flying too close to the sun. So another similarity to the myth is Pandora's Labyrinth of Deceit. Pitt gets lost within this labyrinth looking for Pandora, and this is a direct connection to the labyrinth in which Icarus and Daedalus were trapped in. With all that being said, let's consider Icarus to be the blueprint, because besides the name, the flying, and the labyrinth, there's not too much else in the game that comes directly from the myth. So don't worry, we've got plenty of other influences to discuss. Next, we're going to talk about Perseus. Perseus is another one of Pitt's character influences, and he is most well known as the slayer of Medusa within Greek mythology. And yes, Medusa is also in Kid Icarus Uprising. So there's a big similarity right there, a huge one. So in Greek mythology, Medusa was also known to have snakes in her hair. The game designers did a fantastic job at applying that feature to her character with her animation and giving her just overall a more villainous vibe. I really love how they did her character. So, Pitt is summoned to defeat Medusa in the game, and Perseus defeats her within the myth. And Pitt uses the 3 sacred treasures to defeat Medusa in the game. And these treasures include the mirror shield, the wings of Pegasus, and the arrow of light. Stay with me here. I'm gonna tie it all together. Don't worry. So how I interpreted it was that each of the 3 treasures involves something related to each of the myths that Pitt is based on. So, the mirror shield can be connected to the Aegis. The Aegis is, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This is what Perseus used to defeat Medusa. It's a reflective shield that Perseus was able to look at Medusa through the reflection of without being stoned by her. In the myth, if you look into the eyes of Medusa, she has the power to turn you to stone. We don't see these powers within the video game, but the mirror shield is definitely connected to the Aegis. So, next, the arrow of light can simply be traced back to Cupid. As we all know, he does in fact shoot arrows, so that's pretty simple there. And then lastly, there are the wings of Pegasus, and these grant Pitt the power of limitless flight while he has them equipped, because we know that his wings burn if he goes for longer than 5 minutes. I'm a little confused by who this treasure is meant to represent. The wings of Pegasus specifically. Part of me wants to believe it's related to Icarus and Pitt gaining the powers that Icarus maybe never had access to. But the other part of me thinks it may also be derived from Perseus's myth, because once he slays Medusa and cuts her head off, Pegasus sprung out of her neck. So that, I feel like that's reaching in terms of they're just shoes that Pitt wears, but they're important because they're one of the 3 treasures. But yeah, that one I was a little stumped with on the connection. Maybe it's both, maybe it's neither, who knows. But that was how I interpreted it. So finally, let's briefly discuss Eros, or Cupid. I'm going to refer to him as Cupid from here on out. So let's talk about his similarities to Pitt. So Cupid is known as the god of love. Pitt's name actually derives from the Japanese pronunciation of Cupid. The game was developed in Japan, so that makes sense. Pitt also collects hearts as a form of currency, which can be connected back to the god of love. And one of the biggest connections between the two is the use of bow and arrows. Pitt's signature weapon within the game is his bow, existing in a variety of different versions. Cupid uses multiple different arrows as well. He uses golden arrows to shoot at people and make them fall in love, but he also uses arrows made of lead, and when shot with a lead arrow, it can make a person fall out of love or even become hateful towards their past lover. So, their biggest connection is the use of similar weapons. Now that we've got Pitt all figured out, let's discuss some of the other characters from the game and who they represent within mythology. I want to start by briefly touching on Dark Pitt first, just to kind of get him out of the way, because I had a little confusion with who he is supposed to represent. This is my own theory, but I almost wonder if he's meant to be sort of the resurrection of Icarus falling from the sky, because as we discussed in the last video, Dark Pitt does have the power of limitless flight. Maybe I'm reaching with that, but I feel like Dark Pitt has to be at least a little bit based on some part of the myth. So I'm not sure with that. It just kind of seems like he is like the opposite of Pit. So maybe the opposite of Icarus would be like dead Icarus. I'm not sure if that's what Dark Pit is supposed to be. So maybe I'm reaching with that. But another correlation we see relating to Dark Pit is that towards the end of the game, when Pit's wings burn up after he flies for too long and they have that whole war, Dark Pit takes him to the revival spring, a hot spring used to replenish health. Remember all that? Yeah. So, well, in real life, the Greek island Icaria, named after the Icarus myth, is also known for their hot springs located in a town called Therma. It's just the little things, like that is just such a random, crazy, tiny fact. Like the attention to detail is spectacular, and the amount of research they must have had to do to make this game be so accurate or at least correlate so much with mythology, it just blows my mind. So anyways, let's keep going. Next up, we're going to talk about Palutena, the goddess of light. So it's said that her character is based on Athena, goddess of wisdom and battle strategy. This holds up because Palutena is consistently seen helping sort Pit in battles, and she even has her own army. And another connection between the two is that Athena was the one who gifted Perseus the Aegis in his myth where he fights Medusa, while Palutena granted Pit the mirror shield, which he uses to help defeat Medusa. So that's a big correlation right there. Palutena is not a real character within Greek mythology, but I believe she's based off of Athena. So next up, there is a creature known as the Twin Bellows within the video game. And this is a two-headed fireball spewing monster known as the gatekeeper of the underworld fortress. This character can be directly linked to Cerberus within Greek mythology. So different names, but Twin Bellows is based directly off of a character within mythology. Cerberus is a dog with multiple heads that guards the underworld and keeps the dead from escaping. He's also known as the Hound of Hades, and Hades is also in our game. So I just think it's so cool how they paid attention enough to include his sidekick like that. So speaking of Hades, he's in our game as well. He is actually the main antagonist of our game, just beating out Medusa as our secondary antagonist. Hades is the character with the truest identity to his mythological counterpart, I believe. In the game, Hades is known as Lord of the Underworld, while in mythology, he is known as God of the Underworld. So that's really, really similar. And also there is Poseidon, god of the sea, is another character who directly reflects their character within mythology as well. Yeah, these characters have the same exact name, they're the gods of the same thing, and they all just directly reflect each other. So, moving on, the last few characters we're going to discuss are known as fictional gods and goddesses within the game. So we've got Verity, who is the goddess of nature, Pandora, who is the goddess of calamity, and finally Pyrrhon, who is god of the sun. So this is just my interpretation of these characters and who they could possibly be loosely based on. So starting with Pandora, she did actually exist within Greek mythology, but she was a human, not a goddess. So that's where the two differ. But then I found that the closest individual to compare Verity to would be Gia. I don't really know how to say the name. Apologies if I pronounce it wrong. But she is known as the goddess of earth and mother of all life. And then lastly, as well, for Pyrrhon, I found that Apollo and Helios were sun gods to exist within Greek mythology, so that was where I made a connection for his character. So wow, that was a lot, right? Who would have thought that this much research and attention to detail surrounding Greek mythology would be discoverable within a Nintendo 3DS game? Now that we've done our deep dive, let's stray away from the characters for a bit and focus on the beautiful music within this game. Check back in later for video 3 as we explore the soundtrack. You might even get to hear a few pieces played by yours truly. Thanks for watching!